Now, the purpose of the Bible is to testify of Jesus Christ. The Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, points to Christ.
The Bible is true in a very strange way. What you do as an educated person is sample that structure that constitutes the sum total of the texts of our civilization.
Because if those four things are true, that there's truth, that God exists, that miracles are possible, and the New Testament is reliable enough to let us know that the resurrection occurred, then Christianity is true. Because if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity is true.
So, what is the food you give to the soul? It is reading the Bible, the Word of God. And I don't care who you are, you cannot live a victorious life if you neglect Bible reading and Bible study.
But what we have at stake here is far more than that. You know, your life depends on this book. So read it.
Numbers, chapter 4, the Pulpit Commentary, the Duties of the Levites, chapter 4. Verse 2, take the sum of the sons of Kohath, the Levites having been separated from the other tribes. The Kohathites are now to be separated from amongst the other Levites for the most honorable and sacred duties. To them, the preference was given presumably because the priests were Kohathites. Verse 3, from 30 years old and upward. The age at which they became liable for service was shortly after reduced to 25 numbers. Chapter 8, verse 24, and at a later period to 21st Chronicles chapter 23, verse 27. In the wilderness, a larger number of the men might be required to attend to their own camps and their own families, but the explanation may probably be found in the unusually large proportion who were at this time between the ages of 30 and 50. The Septuagint has altered 30 into 25 to make it agree with Numbers chapter 8 verse 24. 30 years became among the Jews the perfect age at which a man attained to full maturity and entered upon all his fights and duties. Compare Luke chapter 3 verse 23. Into the host. Not the military ranks, but the militia sacra of the Lord. To do the work. Literally, to war the warfare. Verse 4 about the most holy things. Rather, the most holy things. They were the service of the Kohathites. So the Septuagint. Verse 5 the covering veil. The curtain which hung before the Holy of Holies. Afterwards known as the veil of the temple. Luke chapter 23 verse 45. Verse 6 the covering of badger skins. Probably of sea cow skins takash, but see Exodus chapter 25 verse 5. The Targum of Palestine and the Septuagint both render it a covering of hyacinthine skin. The later Jews would have no knowledge of the marine animals common on the shores of the Red Sea. A cloth wholly of blue. This was the distinctive outer, and therefore visible, covering of the most sacred thing, the ark. Verse 7 the dishes, and the spoons, and the bowls, and covers to cover withal. Rather, the plates, the bowls, the wine pitchers, and the chalices for pouring out, i.e., the drink offerings. The two first seem to have been used in the meat offering. The two last in the drink offering. Verse 8 shall put in the staves thereof. This formula is repeated alike with reference to the ark, the table, and the two altars. It would therefore be natural to suppose that the staves had all been taken out while the various coverings were put on. On the other hand, it is expressly directed in Exodus chapter 25 verse 15 that the staves of the ark shall not be taken from it. Two explanations are possible. Either the former command does not contemplate the necessity of wrapping up the ark, and only applies to all times when it was at rest, or in movement, or else the latter direction only means, in the case of the ark, that the staves should be adjusted for the purpose of bearing. Verse 9 snuff dishes. Some render this word extinguishers, but it could hardly bear that meaning. since it also signifies censers in Numbers, chapter 16, verse 6, and fire pans in Exodus, chapter 27, verse 3. They were evidently shallow metal pans available for many different purposes. Verse 10 upon a bar, i.e., a bearing frame. Alpha Pi Nu Alpha Phi Omicron Omega Nu, Septuagint upon a rest, Targum of Palestine. Verse 12 all the instruments of ministry. These do not seem to be, at any rate exclusively, the vessels pertaining to the golden altar. They are not packed up with it, but separately, in a blue cloth and a skin covering of their own. Probably they include all the vessels and utensils used inside the tabernacle, which have not been previously mentioned. Verse 13 take away the ashes. This is omitted by the Septuagint. The Hebrew word for ashes is of somewhat doubtful meaning, being only used here and in Exodus chapter 27 verse 3, Psalm chapter 20 verse 3, see margin. Being connected with the word fat, it may perhaps mean the grease or dripping from the burnt offerings. The Targum of Palestine renders it cinders. As the altar was hollow and was filled with earth or stones when used, there would be no need to cleanse it from ashes if this be the meaning of the word. The command would rather have been to collect the living embers before the altar was removed, in order to keep alive the sacred fire. That this fire was never allowed to go out may be looked upon as certain. Verse 15 these things are the burden of the sons of Kohath. One thing which the Kohathites almost certainly had to carry is omitted here, possibly because it was carried without any cover at all, and was not regarded as of equal sanctity with the rest. Anyhow, the omission is very remarkable, and may have been accidental. It is supplied by the Septuagint and the Samaritan text in the following addition to verse 14, and they shall take a purple cloth, and cover the laver and its foot, and they shall put it into a hyacinthine cover of skin, and put it on bars. The burdens of the Kohathites were 6, not counting the laver and its foot, 1 the ark, 2 the table of showbread, 3 the candelabrum for the golden altar, 5 instruments of ministry, 6 the frame of the brazen altar. Verse 16 to the office of Eleazar. Oversight. Septuagint, Pi Sigma Kappa Omicron Pi Omicron Alpha Lambda Epsilon Zeta Alpha Rho. Pi Iota Sigma Kappa Omicron Pi. On him was laid the oversight of and the responsibility for all the material appliances of divine worship. And in especial it devolved upon him to see to the oil, the incense, and the chrism, and the materials for the daily meat offering. No doubt it is intended, although not precisely expressed, that the Kohathites were specially under his orders. Verse 18 cut ye not off the tribe of the families of the Kohathites. The word tribe Shebet is used in an unusual way here, not in the sense of tribus, but of stirps. Perhaps as Levi was himself a microcosm of all Israel, so his families ranked as tribes. And no doubt they remain more distinct than the families of any other tribe. The meaning of the command is plainly this: take care that the Kohathites are not cut off through any negligence or want of consideration on your part. And the form of the command, cut ye not off, conveyed most emphatically the warning that if any mischief befell the Kohathites which the priests could have prevented, they would be responsible for it in the sight of God. No doubt, as a fact, the Kohathites would take their cue from the conduct of the priests. If they were irreverent and careless, the Levites would be the same, and would sooner or later presume, and, presuming, would die. Verse 19 thus do unto them, i.e., exactly as commanded in verses 5 through 15. Verse 20 they shall not go in to see when the holy things are covered. This translation is disputed. The word rendered are covered is the Peel infinitive from bala, to swallow, and so to destroy. It may signify the extreme rapidity with which the most holy things were hidden from sight and removed from touch, so as to become, as it were, non-existent for the time. So the Syriac, Arabic, Samaritan, and the Targums of Onkelos and Palestine. On the other hand, it may be a proverbial expression in a swallow at a gulp, i.e., for an instant, as in Job chapter 7 verse 19. And so the Septuagint, Zypionealpha, and most modern scholars. Whichever way, however, we take it, the phrase, "they shall not go into sea," seems to limit the prohibition under pain of death to the deliberate act of entering the tabernacle out of curiosity during the process of packing up the holy things. The case of the men of Bethshemesh, therefore 1 Samuel chapter 6 verse 19, does not fall within the letter of this law, although it does within its spirit. The command, thus limited, is no doubt an addition to the previous command not to touch, but it is altogether in keeping with it. If it was the will of God to hedge about these sacred symbols of His presence and His worship with an awful sanctity, it is obvious that He was as much bound to defend them against the irreverent prying of the eye as against the irreverent touch of the hand. And the prying here prohibited would have been distinctly willful and inexcusable. Verse 25, they shall bear the curtains, etc. For these 4 coverings, of tapestry, of goat's hair, of ram's skins, and of sea-cow's skin respectively, see Exodus 26. In addition to these, the Gershonites carried all the hangings belonging to the tabernacle and to the outer court, with the single exception of the veil which was wrapped round the ark. Verse 26, and their cords, and all the instruments of their service. Taking this verse in connection with verse 37, we must understand the word there as applying to the things mentioned in the previous verse. The Merarites carried the cords, etc., of the hangings of the court. Verse 28, under the hand of Ithamar, as also were the Merarites. He had been already engaged in overseeing the construction of the tabernacle. Exodus chapter 38. Verse 21. Verse 31, this is the charge of their burden, viz., all the solid parts of the fabric of the tabernacle, and its cord by far the heaviest burden, and so allotted to the largest number. Verse 32, by name ye shall reckon the instruments of the charge of their burden. This injunction only occurs here. The Septuagint has numbered them by name, and all the articles borne by them. Perhaps the solid parts of the fabric were numbered for convenience of setting up, and, therefore, were assigned each to its own bearer. Verse 48, those that were numbered of them were 8,580. The census of each family is described in the same form of words, with much particularity. No doubt it was carried out with extreme solicitude, as made for a purpose especially sacred and important. The results are remarkable in more ways than one. The table presenting the numbers in each family above 1 month, and between the ages of 30 and 50, has been omitted to ease confusion. The first conclusion which naturally arises from these figures is that after all the numbering must have been made by tens, and not by individuals, as it was impossible that 3,000 persons could be employed in carrying the various portions of the tabernacle. It may be that each group of 10 undertook a unit of responsibility. The second consideration is that the average of men between 30 and 50 in all Levi is higher than modern statistics show. It is said to be 25%. Now in the whole population, although not very materially. The third is that this average is very unequally distributed, rising to a most remarkable proportion in the case of Merari. It is quite clear that something must have disturbed the relative numbers as between the Merarites and the other families. It has been suggested that the small number of male Levites generally, and the small number of male Kohathites, between 30 and 50 especially, may have been caused by heavy losses incurred in carrying out the divine sentence upon the worshippers of the golden calf, Exodus 32. But 1. The slow increase of Levi continued to be very observable down to the time of David, while the other tribes grew from 600,000 to 1,300,000. He only increased to 38,000. 1 Chronicles chapter 23 verse 3. 2. The average of males over 30 is already higher among the Kohathites than might have been expected. It is the largeness of the number, not the smallness, which needs to be explained. 3. It is Merari, and not Kohath, that is markedly distinguished from the other two. There is little difference between Kohath and Gershon. It is evident that something must have happened to the tribe of Levi, and in especial to the family of Merari, to reduce very greatly the number of births within the last 30 years. We do not know what the causes were, or why they should have pressed much more heavily on one tribe, or one family, than on another. But it is easy to see that many such causes may have acted, and acted unequally, under the cruel tyranny of Pharaoh. The children may have been systematically slaughtered, or marriages may have largely ceased, while Moses was in the land of Midian. If this were generally the case, it would much diminish the estimated total of the nation, and still more the estimated difficulties of the march. Verse 49. Thus were they numbered of him, literally, and his mustering. It may have the meaning given to it in the AV, and so the Septuagint and Targums, or it may be translated mustered things, i.e., things assigned to him in the mustering. And read with the previous words, every one to his service, and to his burden, and his mustered things.